good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charlene Margot, and I'm co-founder of nonprofit The Parent Venture. Welcome, Grace Hawthorne. We're so glad to have you with us today.
Oh my God, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on. So welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for taking a little time out of your Friday to join us. I am so happy and honored to be here. I was invited to speak about just, I guess, with the publication of my new book, Make Possibilities Happen. Just to give you a little background, this book is kind of like a capstone project of midlife in some ways for me. I'm middle-aged, and inside this book is basically 30 years of entrepreneurial experience, 15 years of teaching in the classroom, and 10 years of scientific research. And I kind of wrote this book as much for me as I did for all of you. Because I feel like now more than ever, we all need to step into our creative power and build a better tomorrow together, whatever that means, for all of us, large and small. We are all creators, and I'm going to talk about that a lot. I'm also going to share kind of the provenance of the book, because the through line for the book is basically I want to say the scientific research and this course called Creative Gym that I've taught at the D-School for almost 15 years. It's one of the two longest running classes at the Stanford D.school, and it's amazing. And every year, even though it's been running for so long, it is a new experience because you have a new cohort of students in the class with different backgrounds, and they bring a different context. So in any case, I love this book. I love the content of this book, and I love the opportunity that this book allows, which is to showcase kind of the work we've done at the D-School. So just to kind of frame what the book is about, the D-School asked, like, hey, Grace, you're really generative. Like, you seem to make a lot of things happen. Can you write about that? And I was like, oh, okay. And that seems like a kind of a very meta, general, obtuse sort of question. But when I sat down and thought about, okay, how do things actually happen, and how have I made them happen in my work life and my teaching life? And it all comes down to two pain points that stand in between us and all of, I guess, our outcomes and possibilities that we wish for. And it is one, starting, and two, finishing. Obviously, we can't finish anything that we don't start. And I feel like I kind of know a lot about that, not because of the things I've been able to produce in my career thus far, but because of how I've been able to teach people in the classroom of how to develop that muscle. So a little bit more on that later. So next, I wanted to just share a little bit about the D-School. I know you heard about, it's a design place. Okay, so it's a design hub at Stanford. And when we say design, it's not a matter of aesthetics. It's a matter of innovation. Innovation means problem solving. It used to be housed under the School of Engineering. And just recently, actually last year, it became a degree granting kind of standalone school, which is amazing. And I think the focus and the important thing that I've always taken away from this place is that we're not about the innovation. So there's consulting groups like IDEO in the world who you can pay lots of money, and they'll come in and they'll troubleshoot, whatever issue or problem that you're trying to solve, and support you with a bunch of outcomes and answers and solutions. But here at the D-School, we're focused not on the outcome, we're focused on the person. So we're not about we're there to transform people into innovators. We're not about the innovations. And I think that's a really, really key thing, because within each student, there's infinite number of solutions, and that's something that gets passed on and on. So for those of you who are educators that are on this webinar right now, hats off to you, because I do, and I don't know, that's my personal viewpoint, that anybody who has devoted or committed their life to becoming an educator or as an educator, that to me in many ways is one of the most noble professions, because you give a gift or you share a gift that keeps on giving. And that is about learning, and that's a lifelong thing. So hats off to you. And for those parents that are on, this is something we're discussing before this call or this webinar started, is that while children, and I have a 21 and an 18-year-old, just to put it in context, so I've had kids, well, they spend a lot of time in the classroom, like maybe a majority of their day, from K through 12, maybe college too, in the classroom. I feel like, me personally, my viewpoint is a majority of who they become and how they move in the world comes from the home, and that is us, the parents. So I love sharing this information to everybody in every context. This isn't just about educators or just about parents. Like, this is about people, right? About being people who take action and who show up in the world ready to work and with a positive attitude for a better future. So that's kind of I want to say, like, the wrapper I like to put around things. So Creative Gym, this course that I've taught for such a long time at the D.school, it was ahead of its time, or it was kind of new in the forefront at the D.school. I want to say the D.school was founded, I think, around 2005 and 2006. We first taught this class in the academic year of 2008. At the time, there were only a handful of classes. They were mostly project-based or subject-based. And I saw this white space, which was this opportunity. I'm like, wait a second. What about skills, like personal skills? Because we all know, and this is the analogy I love to use, is a recipe. Just because you have a food recipe, let's say banana bread. So I have this awesome one pot wonder banana bread, 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of sugar, a teaspoon of vanilla, an egg, and half a cup of sugar, and you stir it, and it's amazing. 3 bananas. I like to put more. And if I gave all of us that recipe and we made that, we went back to our kitchens and we made the banana bread, and we came back and we had a little banana bread tasting, would our breads all taste the same? Likely, the answer is no. And my question is, why? Why is that? Well, maybe I, put extra bananas and I didn't mash it a lot. Maybe you microwaved your butter and you didn't soften it, you liquefied it. Maybe somebody put the flour at the beginning and not the end, and so it was clumpy, and maybe somebody stirred it longer. Okay, so these nuances, these little details are everything. So this just kind of goes to show, just because you know how to do something doesn't mean you can do it well. So at the time, way back when the D.school, they had a process, they had a set of mindsets, and it's great. You're like, oh, great, I just do these things and I'll be done. No, that's not true. It's how you do those things and in what manner do you do those things. And that's what Creative Gym is about. And basically, it's about honing. I mean, the way we describe it is right here on this in the side. Sorry, I have to lean in to read it. Fast-paced experiential exercises that lay the mental and physical foundation for a potent bias to action. So I feel like this is about you and your personal intuition. And when we talk about intuition, it is, how do you behave when you're not thinking about it? That's your intuition. What does your instinct tell you to do? That is your intuition. And students in this class over 10 weeks, they are basically put through a ton of hands-on activities. That's what the experiential part is. And here I'm going to show you. This is literally like the first day of class. Like, these are the sessions. These are the schedule that you would see. So it's made up of verbs, right? Like how to see, how to connect, how to make. And under these, let's just take session 1, for example. We will run you through, in the 2.5, 3-hour classroom time. I don't know, it depends on the session, but 3 to half a dozen activities. It could be 60 seconds up to 20 or 40 minutes. And it's sort of a forcing function. So imagine if you had a personal trainer at a gym and you show up, so you come into class and they just work you out. How do you feel after that workout? You feel great. You feel like, yeah, I did that. And you feel fortified, right? And that's how I want to say, or I'd like to say, our students feel after each of these sessions, because they're not thinking about what they're doing. We're just telling them what to do. and they're executing, and that is what's training their bias to action. And that to me is kind of the biggest takeaway. We'll talk about why that's really significant in a moment. But right here, I want to show like these subjects translate into these skill sets. So on the right-hand side, or I guess when you're looking at the screen, the right-hand side of the screen, this is a list of all the skill sets that the students touch on while they are participating in our course. And I mentioned the process of design thinking early on. That was 15 years ago. That came with mindsets. About, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago, the D-School added abilities. These are kind of like more nuanced behaviors that you can pull out of the mindsets in some ways. And then these are 21st century learning skills. Like my teaching partner, Seamus Hart, and I, we said, okay, how do we map what we're teaching to this list of skills? And we share that with the students at the end of the course. So this course, let me just say it started with a question. So we're in 2006, about 3 years into the course, maybe 2009, 2010. I had a brain surgeon visiting from Taiwan. He was a fellow at Stanford, and he asked me after 10 weeks, Grace, am I different? I said, yes, Dr. Daniel Hong, you are different. You just took 10 weeks of our course. It was so amazing, wasn't it? He's like, no, Grace, is my brain different? And I asked him, I like turned to him, I said, Daniel, you're the brain surgeon, not me. Like, what? How am I going to answer that? But with that simple query, out of pure curiosity, together, we embarked on an almost decade-long research study on creativity at Stanford. So together, the D-School with the School of Med, we got like a little bit of funding, and we pulled off this amazing study. And it was with Dr. Alan Reese, and he has a Center for Interdisciplinary Brain Sciences Research at Stanford under the School of Med. We had this amazing postdoc named Dr. Manish Sagar, who's now an assistant professor at Stanford, and another, like just a team of amazing other postdocs and participants. So we set up this study. To answer, was Daniel's brain, are students' brains different? How are they changed physically? We're talking like physiologically after undergoing creativity training. So the two questions we asked were, one, can you teach creativity? Oftentimes people say, I'm creative, I'm not creative. Oh, you're more creative than me. Okay, right? Like you've heard that many times. So is that true? Are you born with like a fixed amount of creativity? So that was the first question. The second question that we asked is creativity, like once you have creativity, like, yes, I'm creative, I have it forever. Just like riding a bike, that's acquired knowledge. Once you learn how to ride a bicycle, you kind of don't need to learn it if you haven't done it in 10 years. You just kind of get back on the bike and you ride it and you know how to do it. Or is creativity something that you have to train and upkeep? So think of that as sit-ups. Let's say I had a six-pack because I just, I'm in great shape. I'm not, I'm just using that as an example. I have a six-pack and I'm ripped and I have a strong core. Can I just sit back on the couch and eat potato chips? Because now I have a six-pack and I will forever have a six-pack. Obviously, the answer is no, right? Like if I sit back on the sofa and eat potato chips, that's going to go away, right? I have to keep training to upkeep my strong core. And so the answer is backwards. No, it's not acquired knowledge. Creativity is something you have to keep developing throughout your life. And it's something you can build over time. So while you may start down here, and maybe I started here, you can work your way, at any level, right? It's what you put your time into. And so going backwards, that kind of answers the first question. Yes, you can teach creativity. And so what you see here, this is kind of I wouldn't pay attention too much to this, but I just want to show how complex and how badass this study was. This is the first longitudinal study of its kind on creativity. If you were a participant in this study, you would have had to sit in an fMRI scanner 5 times. Can you believe that? That's a lot for any of you who have ever been in one. It's awful. Like, it's really loud and you can't move. So what people did was we scanned them, and then half of them did an abbreviated version of Creative Gym, and the other half did Mandarin letter tracing. That was like the placebo group. And then we gave them a battery of creativity tests and neuropsych tests, and then they switched. The creativity training group then did the Mandarin letter writing, and vice versa. That's what this is. And then they were scanned again, et cetera, et cetera. So let me just, jump to the end. What we found out was the less you think, the higher rated, like, creatively your outcome was. And that was very, very surprising. And kind of like the headline is, think less, do more. And that's like the only thing you have to remember from this scientific looking slide. So I will point to this, and I can't speak to this scientifically because I am not a brain surgeon, but basically people thought the thinking part of the brain had a lot to do with the actual creative act, and it wasn't the case. In fact, the more quiet that part of the brain was, the higher rated the outcome was. So that's really important. And that's this creativity training or this outcome is important for many reasons. One, we had scientific evidence that all the amazing things that we're doing at the D-School actually do work, meaning like, wow, we created new neural networks in students' brains through the curriculum that we have been executing over the years. And that's amazing because usually, like, we have measured the impact on our students by what they do in the real world. Like, what did they do in the real world? Like, oh my God, that was amazing. This must have helped. Or like self-reported, like, yes, I think I learned that. But here we actually have evidence. So that was huge. And two, I think that maybe more importantly is creative capacity, the skill of creativity isn't a fixed thing. It is something that you can build, and it's at your disposal. You can have as much of it as you want. And this is the analogy I've been using when I talk about this book, which is, if I said to you today, guess what? You are going to have unlimited gas or electricity for your vehicle, if you have one, for the rest of your life. I mean, if somebody came up to me and told me that, I'd be like, yeah, like, that's awesome. Like, gas is $6 almost $6 a gallon where I live. Like, that's ridiculous. So I would be so happy. But guess what? Like, if your car was your brain and creativity was the gas, you do have unlimited gas for your car. You have unlimited creativity for your brain right now. It's just yours for the taking. And that's what I'm trying to share in this book, is tell you, hey, guess what? You have that. And two, how do you do that? Or why is it hard to start? And why is it hard to finish? What's standing in the way of us and the outcomes we want in this world? And to me, this is important as a parent, as a student, as whatever you are, and what roles you have or hats you wear in your life. This is important. I think there's another thing related to this, which is creativity. Not that it's an overused word. I do think that is one of the characteristics of human beings that make us human. We spent, I want to say, 4 to 6 months really defining what creativity meant for our research study. And this is what we came up with. And you kind of have to plant the flag. So when you say creativity, when we wrote our published research papers, like what that meant. And at the D-School, creativity is a state of being when you are able to synthesize novel connections. Okay, I want to point out, we're not saying come up with novel ideas. No, there's, my book will tell you there's no new ideas. It's about making new connections of existing pieces of information. That creates a new idea, right? And what you're doing when you make these connections is it's to express meaningful outcomes, meaning that it is doing something good for the world. And then, I think this is really important. And I love everything. I mean, I'm telling you, like Bernie Roth was part of, like, we had like D.school team and like, med school team, and we're just, we were whiteboarding it for so long. And this is literally where we landed. And it's really distilled, and it is a really great definition. But I really want to shift. I feel like when we say the word creativity, it's up here, like I'm creative, I'm not creative. I think that's where that conversation or that self-talk comes from. But if we position it not as like a noun or this like talent or ability that we have to have, and maybe shift the conversation to being a creator, just like the D-school talks about innovators versus innovations, it's the same play. We are all creators. I don't care if you're making a meal, if you're creating a getaway for your family, you're planning a school fundraiser, it doesn't matter. Or you have a startup, like whatever. We are all creators. We do it every day. Probably, I think the human makes like over 5,000 decisions in a minute, or some crazy statistic. I'm sure we create like thousands of things in a waking day. And I feel like if we shift the conversation away from creativity, not that creativity is a bad thing to talk about, I think it's a wonderful and kind of the crux of all good things, if we can tap into it, to creators, that puts the responsibility on us, right? Remember I said it's ours for the taking. So it's no longer about ability, it's about how we are being. It's not about the idea, like, oh my God, it's a great idea. It's about taking action. It's not about the outcome. Oh my God, look at what I did. It's about the process. You know how they always say, it is a cliche, like, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. I'm telling you, that's true. And maybe there's some people who are older than me. Again, I'm middle age, but as I age and the more experiences I put under my belt, it is so true. It is about the process, because that's where we learn, that's where we expand, and that's where we can build and build on, right? So in the book, we're going to now dive into the book a little bit, and not too much. I'm just going to give you a little sampling of some exercises or activities that I can hopefully help you activate, and hopefully you guys can pick up the book, because after each chapter, I have an activity that's derivative from something that I've run in Creative Gym in my class that you can do by yourself at home. So to create the possibilities of your making, there's 4 parts. It's very simple. It looks simple. See, start, do, and finish. And it was really hard. I wanted to like create like a one-line takeaway for each of these, but it would be like 20 bullets long. So bear with me when you read this. If you read the book, you're gonna be like, that's not what that was about. But this is my best effort to encapsulate. When I say see, when I say visualize your desired outcome, it's about being aware of your bias of what you see and what you're not seeing. Okay. And we do this like in session 1. You saw like right here, like seeing is the number one. It's our first session. Be aware of the context that you bring to the table. Like when we communicate, if I said, oh my God, it was so blue, like maybe you're thinking, maybe you were just in Cancun or somewhere where turquoise water was blue. And for me, it was the rainy skies of yesterday that were kind of a blue-gray. When I say blue, it's like deficient, right? But when you say something, they're pulling from their body of experience. And we have to honor everybody's body of experience, because that is wholly unique to them and to yourself, and never discount that. Never think like, oh my God, I did this or I didn't do that, so I don't have that. No, your unique combination of your context is worth a bazillion dollars. Just know that. And you have to be aware when you interact with people and the way you see the world, you're not seeing the world the way the world is. You're seeing the world as you are, from your context and your lens. And in order to see possibilities, you have to kind of like drop what you know, right? And we're going to kind of practice that in a minute. Lead with your curiosity. Start. That's the hardest thing. What do I say? Disrupt program behaviors. What are you waiting for? Just begin. We often like, oh, I'll do that when this happens. I'll do that when it's like, no, just start. Do something. I don't care how little. because momentum begets momentum. And if you sit around waiting for the perfect day, the perfect weather, until that piece falls into place, you're waiting until the cows come home. And guess what? They're never coming home. So just get started, please. Do. Nothing happens without doing. Ideas are a dime a dozen. And in order to create value, you have to put action on your ideas. And it says, okay, when we think of ideas, sometimes they're so big. Like if I say, I need to lose 30 pounds, I'm like, 30 pounds? Like, well, it took me 5 years to gain 30 pounds. Am I going to lose it in 4 weeks? Probably not. Or, if I did, that'd be really unhealthy. So I have to I'd have to lose 30 pounds, probably I could probably do that in 9 or 10 months in a healthy way if I worked really hard at it. But that's the point. You have to break it up into little things. So if I said 30 pounds by next week, I give up. I don't even want to start. But if I say I'm going to do a pound every 2 weeks, I think I can peel that off. That's doable. And then also embrace tensions and failure. We think when something feels uncomfortable, we're like, ew, our body shrinks back. It feels unsafe, we pull back. Something doesn't make sense, we step back. But what we need to do instead of stepping back is stepping forward, right? When we lean. And I think the perfect analogy is a kite flies at its highest point, at its zenith, with the most wind resistance. Have you ever flown a kite when it's just kind of breezy? You're like, oh, and you're trying to pull it to make it have more resistance so it'll rise higher. Just remember kite. When you're like, oh, this feels uncomfortable, go, oh, I'm a kite. It's okay. I need to lean into that tension and that discomfort, because we are programmed to protect ourselves in those way. And I think I talk about that later, so I won't get into that now. And then finish. I think the takeaway here is don't judge yourself. Don't stop caring about what other people think. That's so hard. I gotta tell you, even with this book, I'm checking ooh, how many, reviews do I have? What were the reviews? You're killing yourself when you do that, right? Why? I know what I did. I feel good about what I did. I know why I did it. And I hope as many people pick it up and enjoy it, right? Because I made it and I created it with that intention. And don't let, people who poo-poo it or whatever bring me down. Anyways, that's really hard to do. But honestly, we are our own best judges, within the context that I know that the world doesn't know or see of what I did and why I did it. And that goes for you too. So, and the older I get, I think I should care less about what people think. And that's a hard thing. I think it's human nature. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to be liked and appreciated. But there's a point where you just gotta, that can't define you, right? And the outcomes that you produce. So that's that. So when we talk about seeing, so now I'm going to go through, let's see, okay. So I see the time. I will go through and highlight, I will run us through one activity. So takeaway for seeing, okay? And I kind of already said it in the last slide, but the one thing I didn't say is that we are wired for comfort, certainty, and safety. Just if you were a caveman and you saw a woolly mammoth run at you, if you weren't running for your life, you'd be dead. So that's programmed in on a cellular level. But right now in this day, we don't have woolly mammoths. We have the disinformation of social media and the internet. We have a lot of other things. But just if again, pointing back to what I just said about tension and discomfort, if oh, I'm pulling back because that's my brain trying to protect me. But you know what? I'm going to lean into that and see where that takes me. So you are the boss of your brain. Focus on what you want to happen, not what you don't want to happen. And parents out there, stop worrying. Can I tell you, I tell my mom this every day. I'm like, if you think about me, do not attach that to a worry. What is a worry? A worry is a thought about the bad outcome that might happen, right? I get it. My kids go away or they're at a game or on a trip. I'm like, I worry for their safety. I want them to come home safely. I get it. But I'm just telling you, in my book, I talk about this concept called target fixation. What you look at is where you're going to drive into. It's a phenomenon in driving. If we're driving in Tahoe and my car starts skidding out and my car starts pointing to a tree, if I keep looking at the tree, I will beeline my car into that tree. But if for some reason I say, oh my goodness, oh crap, and I look back on the road, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because I turn my head and like my arms turn or what, but I'm telling you, if you keep your eye on that tree, you're going to hit that tree. So it's the same thing with what we want to have happen. If you worry about this, if you catastrophize, I can't even say the word today, but if you think the worst, if you always think, oh my God, this might happen. Oh my God, this might happen. You're putting energy there. You're looking at the tree. So stop looking at the tree. Look at the road where you want to drive and to the outcome that you want to see for yourself, because that's where you want your thoughts and your energy to go. Okay. Really, I tell my mom this literally once a week and she doesn't listen to me. So doing a Duchamp, I think if we just peel this off, this would be amazing. And I'm going to have you guys do it right now. So get in the chat. This is the way we're going to do it. Okay, so just to give a little background, Marcel Duchamp, for those of you who may not have ever heard his name, he was one of the most influential artists of the 20th century. He influenced Picasso and all the pop artists that came after him. He took a urinal. This is like a discarded urinal from the dump. He turned it upside down and he signed his name, R.S. Mutt, even though that isn't even his name. And he put it on a pedestal in an art exhibit. And he said, this is art. And people were angry. They were like, are you joking? Like, what? I could have made that. That's not art. But look at what he did. He recontextualized something that had a previous life and purpose, and he gave it another meaning and use. Whether you disagree or agree that this is art or not, it doesn't matter. When Ariel, everybody has, I'm assuming, has seen Little Mermaid, when she, like, you know, she's swimming on the thing and she finds a fork, she obviously doesn't eat food on a plate like we do, right? But what does she start doing? She starts combing her hair with the fork. So the fork is no longer an eating utensil, it is a hair comb, right? So there's this, there's an activity we run called Doing a Duchamp, and I want you guys to do that now. So in the chat, just look on your desk or wherever you're sitting, look at an everyday object. Like for me, I have a pen. I'm going to look at this pen. So write pen in your chat, okay? And we actually do this live with live props, okay? But since we're doing this at home, you're going to just look at the item. It could be cup, whatever it is. Now, I want you to type in the next 15 seconds, okay? You're going to go for volume. You're not going to be like, oh my God, people are going to read my out. I don't care. Nobody's going to read your response, all right? I want you guys to write as many things. If this pen is not writing, okay? So we can even do pen if you want, okay? And that'll be kind of interesting. We can see what everybody comes up with pen. If this pen is not used as a writing utensil, what else could it be? Okay. And I want you to think of different contexts in your life or different contexts that, you know, like use your imagination. Like, what could this be? Right. I'll give you like, I could pick the wax out of my ear. I could pick my nose. I could, you know, put it as, okay, you get my point. Okay, ready? Go. Type as many things in your little chat thing. You wrote pen, and I just want to, you know, go for volume. 10 seconds have passed. I'm going to give you another 10 seconds. Write as many things a pen can do. If you were in my class, okay, as many things a pen could be, that's not a pen, right? We would be blasting really fun music, right? Okay, I'm gonna give you 5 more seconds. Okay, stop. That was 30 seconds. That felt like a nanosecond, didn't it? Why? Because you were just doing it, hopefully. Now send it, share it with everybody. I'm not even looking at it. I can't even access the chat right now. And later, everybody can look at what everybody wrote, all right? There's no wrong answer. There's no right answer. That's the one thing at the D school. It's like, there's never like a bad idea. So if you said something that you think was the dumbest thing ever, it doesn't matter. It's the best thing ever, okay? Because that thing that you think is silly could lead to the solution. So you never discard anybody's idea, okay? So that is an example of doing a Duchamp. And if you were in class, we'd actually have a table of everyday things. And it's really fun because the kids do it in teams. And so for educators, you could try this in your classroom. And they have a minute, and there's a tallier, and then there's another person who literally changes the context. So within a minute, every 15 seconds, we give them a new context. So it's the same objects, like I'm looking at my desk. I have a book, I have a pen, I have a cup, I have glasses and Post-its. So let's say like there's just like the same fixed number of objects and the same objects, and we say circus. And then they'll be like the elephant tamer, you know what I mean? Like they literally like pick it up and like call out like a different purpose each item could be within that context. And then we'll change the context. We'll be like shopping mall, right? And then they'll be like, and then they have to like pick up the item and call out things that those things could function as within that context. So that's a great activity. And what that does is it creates this bias to action. It's the forcing function. You had 30 seconds, write as many things as you can. You couldn't think about it, right? We turned off the thinking brain and we try to turn on your doing brain. Moving on to start. Starting is where impossibility goes to die, right? You have to start. Starting is probably, I think, harder than finishing in many, many ways. A lot of people have great ideas, but ideas are a dime a dozen. They don't mean anything unless you put the elbow grease behind it. And I think we talked about that. So lean into the discomfort. Don't wait until the perfect XY scenario. There's never a better time than now. And that sounds cliche, but it is true. And it's okay to start actually and put it on the back burner. Like if something comes to you and there's a seed of an idea, just get it out of your head, put a little work behind it and set it aside. And if it's still calling you, you'll know it's important. I think that's a good way of also kind of like testing your ideas. This one we're not going to do just because we're not live and I didn't give you a bag and I didn't write a word on your bag, but I wanted to share this activity. This is a warm-up. This is another 60-second activity. So if you're an educator, this is something that you can do. And if you're not one, you can kind of do this at home as well. So the students get a paper bag, and on the bag, I write words. It could be a noun, it could be an adjective, it could be a verb. The nouns are the easiest. If I say, if I say cup, and the challenge is in 1 minute, you take the bag and you use your hands, you transform it into the word. So if you say cup, and I'm like, oh, I'll make this into a cup. Yeah, I know what a cup looks like. If I said love, what does love look like? Okay, some people make a heart, like it actually like rip it into a heart. If I said frustration, some people would make it into a ball. Well, can I tell you, somebody made love into a ball, right? It's fascinating. There's so many things about this activity that are so beautiful and generative. The bias to action is the first. I want to say first and foremost, again, constraint of material, constraint of time, constraint of the prescribed outcome. Those are the levers that creates that learning experience. Here's a picture of some of the outcomes. In here is love, wave, sunset, ladder, right? There could be a dog in here, fire, like what would fire look like? But there's other muscles at work, moving between concrete and abstract. If I said frustration, that's abstract to concrete. If I said dog, right? Making a dog, I mean, that could be concrete to concrete, but you get what I mean. You're like trying to express something, think creatively, and build and craft intentionally. So that's and obviously like with this type of activity, you can abstract that many, many different ways. Dare to suck. I already talked about that. It's okay to fail. Maybe I didn't say that. Fail early, fail often. You want to do it in little bits. Failure is a good thing. It's a course correction. It's a compass telling you, oh, move a little bit more to the right. That's not quite right. You want those indicators, you want that feedback. And that I actually taught a course called Fail Faster. And it's actually one of the, I want to say, evergreen tenets of the D school. One way that we do this, and you should try this at home, and I would have you do it if we were in person, is 1, 2, 3. I don't know if any of you guys have done this, but just real quickly, you alternate with people. 1, 2, 3. I mean, you think that's easy, you can still mess up. But then when you replace 1 with a clap, 2, 3, 2, 3, people will make a mistake. And what you notice is people are like, oh my God, and they'll throw their head up. And it's funny. And by the time we get to like round 3 or round 4, we're like, if you mess up, both people are going to go, yippee, right? To celebrate the error, to change our posture of like this and whatever we do when we make a mistake. So this is a wonderful exercise as well. And last but not least, I'm telling you, finish, 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 finish. It's hard to finish. As an entrepreneur, I mean, you don't even have to be an entrepreneur. Life is like this, right? It's a roller coaster. Can I tell you, when you're in the trough, and there are many troughs ahead of all of us, right? That is just life. And just in like, I'll just put it in my personal business context. When I'm in the trough, I feel like crap. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so hard. I'm so stressed. And you know, you sit in the trough for a short amount of time along, and depends what the situation is. And even though I've been in this place 100 times before, it doesn't feel any less uncomfortable. So in Make Possibilities Happen, there's a bunch of tricks and tactics and workarounds and just behaviors and stories that to remind myself and share with you guys, it's okay. You can get yourself out of that dip. Trust me. Pendulum does always swing. You're over here, you're going to end up over here. You just will. So when you're sitting here, you can get yourself out of here. You can weather this. This is hard. That part is the hardest part, right? You can do that. And hopefully my book will make those moments easier. So that, I think, concludes this presentation. I'm going to stop sharing and we will do some Q&A. And yes.
Oh, Grace, that was a whirlwind. That was so much fun. Everybody, you've got to get this book because Grace talked about connections. My mind was just so busy on every page reading this. So what a great presentation. I can see why they love your teaching at the D School. Okay, Grace, here's my first question.
Yes.
Why? You say at the beginning of your book, take your creativity seriously. Why do we even need to say that to students and educators?
I think people dismiss themselves. I think it's like I said earlier, we tell ourselves stories to protect ourselves because we don't want to fail, because we're ashamed, or we think we're deficient in some way. And that's what I'm saying. Like, no, take it seriously. You, like, whatever you think, forget what you think. I'm telling you, this is your story. You are a creator and you have everything you need to create the future that you want. And you do. And it might take a long time or a short time. I don't know what it is that you're pursuing or what it is. It could be large and small. But I think people don't put enough currency in themselves. And I know the everyday things, like we all have to pay our bills, we all have to go to work, but there's moments and things, there's side hustles that you can do to I want to say enrich, like give yourself more energy. I know if I'm just like doing things I have to do, I feel like crap. Like I feel depleted, I feel tired, I feel like resentful, right? But if you can place moments in your life where you're creating something, that's energizing. I don't care what it is. I know it's energizing.
My worry as a person who really values creativity is that the current school systems, many see creativity as an elective, not a required course. Do you know what I mean? So how do we convince students, educators, parents this is not an elective. This is something that's critical for well-being. What would you say to that?
I think to be a lifelong learner, we have to be whole in character. And in my book of possibilities, I talk about why we have to show up, how when you do show up, you have to have intention. How you do, I say this to my kids all the time, how you do anything is how you do everything. So if
Yeah.
I say, at the table, whatever, it's like, oh my God, you have to do it. Why don't you do your best job, right? Like there's just so many tidbits in this book, and it's about character. There's education. Okay, so in the education system, and I know teachers, they don't have enough time and they have so much on their plate and they're under-resourced. So acknowledging that there's information, there's knowledge, and there's wisdom. And I think with the internet and with technology, we are just like flooding with pieces of information. But the information is meaningless. We're taking in all this stuff and we don't know what's important, what's not, what's true, what's not true. But information to me is like the debris, right? It's like debris. And you have to pull out like, well, what is knowledge, right? Knowledge is when you can activate the information to a purpose. And when you actually have experience with the knowledge, then it becomes wisdom. And wisdom is a part of your fabric. So may not be a good analogy, but if I said, if we read a book on surfing, like, does that mean like, okay, here's how to surf? Okay, whatever. Like, can we even imagine what it's like to stand on a board, in the ocean? Not a chance, right? But like reading how to surf, will that help me inform if I take a board out? Absolutely. And once I ride like 5 or 10 waves, I'll be like, oh my goodness. Like, then like that is a part of my experience. So Albert Einstein said it like decades ago. Wisdom, experience is, I think experience is wisdom. It's not just about knowledge.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answered your question.
It does, Grace. I'm just thinking that this is something that we need to communicate to our kids as parents, as educators, as caregivers. We need to tell them that this is important and that urging them to do something that's maybe just not on the homework track is still important. A good use of their time.
Yes, I agree. And educators, like, it's funny because I just came back from South by Southwest EDU, and there's a lot of talk about what the future of learning and the landscape of learning and technology and like the development gap and resource gap and there's a lot of challenges. And how the question came up is like, how do you fold in this another way of teaching that information that isn't just about doing a math problem, right? Like, how do you relate it to the real world? How do you apply it in more of a project-based or, something that can activate it and make it make more sense? And I think a good example, I'll just tell one of my own, like I was an art major in college and I took an accounting class. I dropped that class. I didn't know it was Greek. I was like, what are they talking about? And I ended up working as a CPA. It's like, and many lifetimes ago, but right out of undergrad, I was an art major. I didn't even know why they hired me. Thankfully, they did, even though that was like 3 years of hell. I'm so grateful I learned that, but I learned by doing it. There's no way I learned that from a book. I would have failed that class. It made zero sense to me. So I think if we can somehow figure out a way to build that in a little bit, I think it'll make a big difference.
I agree. So Grace, my next question is, what brought you to write this book at this time? Like, did you always see yourself as a creative? Was this always you?
I'm going to say yes. Yes, I have a CPA, I have an MBA, like, I like right brain, left brain. I always drew as a kid. And I remember I'm like, I'm going to be a fashion designer. Yeah. Like when I was like 8 or something. And my dad looked at me, he's like, if you wanted to be a fashion designer, you'd already be sewing clothes. I was like, oh my God, he's right. Right. Like it was kind of a realization, like he's right. If I really wanted to do that, I wouldn't just be saying that or thinking about it. I'd be doing something about it. I want all of us like, and what if I did? And okay, what if I did start sewing clothes? And it, you know what, even if I didn't become a fashion designer, the experience of sewing clothes or trying to modify something I already had would give me an experience that I could apply to something else. I guarantee it. I promise you. I remember at a job out of business school, I wrote an industry report. It was for the film and television industry. And I got to interview literally like the top of the field. I don't know, I think executives in distribution, and the most interesting and the smartest executives that I spoke to worked at a hot dog stand or worked in some different industry before they were in the role they were in. The people who were in the role they were in for the last 30 years, they were the least interesting and were the least insightful. So
That's a great story. So Grace, you comment in your book about some research, recent research that suggests that creativity is a state of mind that can be taught and conditioned. You touched on that. In a perfect world, would that be a part of every classroom?
yes, yes, it would. And it's not like a class, like there isn't going to be a creative gym class at every school, even though that'd be a wonderful after school. I'm just telling you, it's a way of having students activate information or explore their curiosity or toggle and discover new ways of communicating. In this day and age, I do think these skill sets are really critical. And in fact, I mean, for the last decade, one of the top two attributes that recruiters want is creativity, right? So I do feel like I do think it's really important, and how we get that into students' hands and heads is it's going to come from a diversity of places. It's not going to be just school or just home, right? It's going to come from as many diversified experiences that they can get their hands on.
Yeah, and you write quite a bit about helping kids find purpose and making connection. And also you touch on this idea that there are no new ideas under the sun. So how do we motivate kids to feel inspired? Maybe not by thinking their ideas are that novel, but the connections and experiences they bring are novel.
That's a really interesting one, and one that came up, like somebody asked on the panel I was at, like, what do you think of stories, right? And I know kids, like if they're younger, they're still discovering and forming what their story is. But when I think about story, I guess specifically in this context and the question that you just asked, is to have them value where they came from and what they're doing. And somehow I feel like this is really critical, that they're the ones that are creating their story. Does that make sense? You're not sentenced to whatever story you showed up with. You're sentenced with the story that you of your own making. And I mean, again, I have a 21-year son who just turned 21. I'm still trying to teach him that, right? Like I'm trying to teach him that 7 ways to Sunday. And I'm like, like, I'm not sure I'm getting through, but I'm going to keep trying, right? And so I feel like if somehow we can empower people to know, like, my life, my outcome, my story.
Yeah.
I'm creating that. That would be amazing, right?
I think that would be incredibly empowering. We're big fans of agency and giving kids more control over their lives. But I think that's really what you're saying. If they can own that story, like a sentence that you wrote, I love this, Grace. To make possibilities happen, you need to replace wanting with work.
Mm-hmm.
If you could unpack that for kids, with kids, right?
Yeah,
And
with kids. And okay, so with kids, and for those with little kids, it's like I have okay, sorry, brother. I have an older brother with younger kids. He has like a 9 and an 8-year-old. And I watch him, give them, like, I don't know if I don't know why he does what he does, but and maybe I come from more of a strict, my brother and I, we are children of immigrants. They were very strict, but I'm not, if you signed up for soccer, you're going to soccer. I don't care if you feel like it. That is, you committed to that and you're going to follow through on that commitment. And when I like see parents, even parents of like my kids' friends, like, oh, you don't feel like it's okay. We don't, it's like, no, it's that comes from us, the parents, right? So while they are creating their story, sometimes they're too young to know really what they want. So we have to balance that. It's not like you're creating your story. Like they don't have enough view, like this view of the world, their view of the world is this big right now because of the years that they've lived, right? So like I'm telling you, I'm bringing back to my 21-year-old, bless his heart. He thinks he knows it all, but I'm like, honey, you know nothing, you know, like a little grain of sand on this beach. Like you really don't know. I'm glad he's confident, but there's a larger context that we see or that we can see with them and next to them and for them that can help them take that agency and ownership.
Absolutely. You'll be pleased to know, Grace, that I went back to grad school in my 50s when my own kids were in college and law school. And my daughter's one piece of advice to her mom was just start.
Yes. Yay!
In the PowerPoint, get out the piece of paper. Anything is okay, right?
Anything is, I am telling you, almost anything is possible if you literally roll up your sleeves and put your mind to it.
Make possibilities happen. Grace Hawthorne, it has been an honor and a pleasure spending an hour with you. All of you who joined us today, what a wonderful, fun, and enriching Friday this was. So again, thank you, Grace. Thank you, D.school. Everybody, you can pick up a copy of this book either through the Stanford D.school website or on other major outlets, right, Grace?
Yes, yes. And if you do buy the book, wherever you buy, you can pop in a great review if you loved it on Amazon or Goodreads or anything. That way other people will want to pick it up too. That would be wonderful. And if you want to see more of my work, you can go to GracieMade, GracieMade.com. I have more links to like the research project and fun things like that. So anyways.
Okay, we got to do that paper bag project. That looked like such fun.
It's cool.
All right. Well, listen, thank you again, Grace Hawthorne, for a wonderful presentation today. Thank you all for being with us, and we hope to see you again soon. Goodbye, everybody. Till next time. Take care.
Thank you.